Okay, it is 11 o'clock and we have seen the numbers slow down, so I will get started now. So welcome everybody. As I said, I'm Gillian Askew. I'm from a company called Go for Growth, and I'll be your host today for the webinar, for the Approved Provider List Service Specific webinar on home-based support. Just to kick off with a little bit of housekeeping. So we are recording the session today. It will be issued out afterwards, so you will get copies of the slide deck. So please don't worry too much about taking too many notes if you don't need to. And we'll do introductions shortly. We do have a chat and a Q&A function today. Please do feel free to introduce yourself on the chat should you want to. You'll notice there is a functionality on the chat. You can chat either to everybody or hosts and panelists only. So just make sure that you are chatting with the person that you want to chat to. But if you have got questions, what we will try and do is, if there are specific questions, we'll either try and answer them straight into the chat, or we'll try and answer them live. But we have made some space for Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions, please use the Q&A function as opposed to the chat function if you can. If for any reason we run out of time, we are going to try and cover quite a lot in this session today. So if we do run out of time, we have got a frequently asked questions document that we are compiling. So any questions that we don't get to, we will add it to the FAQ and we'll answer the questions in slower time. So please don't worry that you will miss anything if we don't get to Q&A today. So I'll just hand over to the team to say hi and introduce themselves. Helen, if I can start with you, please.
Hi, I'm Helen Thurkle. I'm the Strategic Service Development Manager covering the Harrow area, so that's Harrogate locality, but I've got responsibility for the home-based services transformation programme.
Thank you, Helen. Hannah?
Hi, so I also work in the service development team. I'm a strategic service development manager for the Craven locality of North Yorkshire. And then from a portfolio perspective, I am working on the care market sustainability, and involved in the re-procurement of the approved provider lists. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Julie?
Hi, Julie Toman, Quality and Governance Officer for North Yorkshire County Council. A few people on the call will recognise me from Care Connected, but today I'll be talking about our quality pathway and our new quality assurance system we'll be bringing in. Thanks, Gillian.
Thank you, Julie. As I said, I'm Gillian Askew. I work for Go for Growth. So Go for Growth is working in partnership with North Yorkshire County Council, supporting the approved provider list procurement which will go live in the next few weeks, just to help providers have support for processes both before the procurement and during the procurement. And you'll hear a little bit more about that towards the back end of the presentation. And so we'll crack on if that's okay. Hannah, over to you, I think.
Super. So I'll just cover some of the introductory slides here. So just a little bit about what we intend to cover at today's webinar. Today is part of a series of webinars that we're running on specific subjects linked to process and to the different services that will commission under this list, this re-procurement. So we'll start with a bit of an introduction about some of the key overarching changes and principles to the new approved provider list that we'll be procuring and that will come in from the 1st of November. We'll then cover some specifics in relation to the key changes and principles of the new home-based support service specification and some of the key contract terms around the home-based support services that we'll be looking to commission as well. Julie, as she's just mentioned, will give you a brief introduction to the new quality pathway that will be introduced as part of this procurement, and a brief introduction to the new PAMS system that will help us with that quality assurance pathway, hopefully help us and help you as providers. And then Jill will finish by just touching on some of the other support and resources that's available in the lead up to us going live to this re-procurement and throughout the tender live period as well. So as I say, this is part of a programme of support to you as providers throughout this process. And again, as Jill touched on, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Super. So just by way of an introduction, and if you have joined some of the other webinars that we've run already as part of this series, this is a bit of a repeat of that, just to really remind everybody why we're here. So North Yorkshire County Council are currently in the process of re-procuring the approved provider lists for adult social care. So for those of you that are on the call that are current providers of adult social care services via the current approved provider list, you will hopefully know that they come to an end on the 31st of October this year. So we're provisionally looking to publish the opportunity to join the new approved provider list at the beginning of June, and the contracts for that new approved provider list will come into effect immediately from the 1st of November, so immediately from the end of the current approved provider list. An approved provider list, as most of you will know, is a pre-approved list of providers covering a defined set of services. An approval onto that list does not necessarily offer a guarantee of work, but what it does is it pre-approves you at a threshold level to receive individual care packages through our brokerage processes. So to join the new approved provider list and be considered for new packages of care from the 1st of November this year, providers will be required to submit an application to demonstrate they meet minimum required standards prior to approval on those new approved provider lists, and that does apply to providers on the current lists as well. So that's just a couple of the questions that we've had coming through, which is why I've featured that here, that for new business from the 1st of November you must complete an application to join these new approved provider lists, and that application process will include a level of quality assessment and the submission of a price for your services. And there's just a little bit of a note there, and I'm not going to go into detail, but you'll get the slides after. So you can still join the current lists if you want to start working with us before the 1st of November. You just need to follow the current processes for that. So we've just included a link there to do that should you wish to. So hopefully that sets the scene as why we're here. So I'm just moving us on to what some of the overarching changes to the approved provider list are that we're bringing in via this reprocurement to commence from the 1st of November. So if you're a current provider on the call, these are changes. If you're not currently working with North Yorkshire County Council, this is just an introduction to some of the fundamental principles that we're introducing through the new approved provider lists. So we will have 4 lists, so 4 categories of service that we're commissioning through the new approved provider lists. They are residential and nursing services, community-based support services, which covers all of the services that are delivered out and about in the community. So non-regulated services, it might be one-to-one support in the community, day service or daycare type provision, or employment support, so delivered out and about, out of the home and in the community. Home-based support, so what we're here to hear more about today, all of those services that are delivered in a person's home. And then we're introducing a 4th list through this reprocurement, which is a specific list for supported living services with a defined service specification for those services. And there will be a separate webinar covering each of those 4 service areas. So there are new service descriptions for each of those service areas. You'll see themes across the service specifications once they are launched, that we've taken a much more enablement or re-ablement approach throughout of all of the services that we're delivering, that we're commissioning. We have embedded sort of an aspiration for tech innovation, technology-enabled care innovation and digital solutions throughout the service specifications. So really wanting to work together with providers around looking at tech and digital solutions to support people and kind of promote that enablement and re-ablement type approach. The new service descriptions include the new discharge to assess process and timescales that we've seen kind of evolve throughout the pandemic. So that's included within there. We've also introduced a new standards and outcomes framework as part of this reprocurement that applies across all of the service areas, and we're really looking forward to kind of introducing that and working with providers on that new standards and outcomes threshold. Quality and pricing evaluation will take place at the point of application, so that's slightly different to previous years, and that differs from list to list. So Helen will touch on that a little bit in terms of the pricing for home-based support and what that will look like at a high level, but we'll touch on it at the service-specific webinars for each of the different lists. And costing models and terms will change across the lists. And again, Helen will cover this in more detail for home-based support, but looking at hours per week contracts, offering a bit more flexibility for providers and people receiving services in terms of how they receive their support. We've looked to standardise notice periods across the lists, recognising that that's an area of a bit of ambiguity and inconsistency at the moment. So we've looked to standardise that, as well as planned and definitions of planned and unplanned absences. And we've clearing up some definition and guidance for providers that's hopefully supportive in terms of how we want actuals to be recorded in terms of the service you're delivering versus what the contracted service might be. Recognising that people's needs fluctuate from time to time. And then, as Julie will touch on in more detail, PAMs and the quality pathway, introducing those as part of this re-procurement. So I'll hand over to Helen now. I think that's the end of my slides.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm just going to very briefly touch on the standards and outcomes framework. I'm not going to go into each of the domains, and I believe these slides will come out to you, and as this is just an overarching introduction, we just wanted to give you a bit of an oversight of it. So the standards and outcomes framework is divided into 16 domains. It's derived from the East of England standards and outcomes framework, but the foundations of it sit within the Care Act, the NICE guidelines and guidance, and also it incorporates the TLAP Making It Real I and We statements. We have added to it to make sure that it captures everything we would like from a North Yorkshire perspective. So we will give you an opportunity later to further familiarise yourself with this standards and outcomes framework, but I just wanted to touch on it at the moment. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the points I just wanted to make at the outset is that all of the documentation for these 4 lists are brand new. So that includes the contracts, the specification, and all the associated documents that go with it. It's been quite a complex process pulling it all together, and we've had to work with a number of partners to do so. So I just wanted to say at the moment, this is an introduction to it, but we don't have all the answers. So feel free to raise as many questions as you need to. We may not have the answer for you on today's session, but we are hoping to develop an FAQ to respond to all the questions that are raised that we can share with the whole market around that. So the next 2 slides we've got here are directly related to the home-based services lists. So you will remember last time we had a domiciliary and other regulated services list, and the key changes to that is that the home-based services list is an umbrella really for anything that would be delivered within a person's own home. So the service areas that are covered with the list are personal care, as it's defined by the Care Act. So that would be physical assistance, prompting or supervision to do a range of tasks from eating and drinking, toileting, washing and bathing, dressing, oral care, skin, hair and nail care, or medication support. We've also got practical support, which would previously have been on the non-regulated list, but we do identify that we have domiciliary care providers who deliver both personal and practical support, and we also have providers going into people's own homes that are non-regulated. So we wanted to make sure that this was able to capture that. So in terms of practical support, it's, as you would anticipate, it's food prep, shopping, support to prepare meals, household tasks, prescription collections, medication checks, medical appointments, and household management within all of that. We've also got sitting services on here. Now, I know that before we had regulated sitting services on the regulated list, and non-regulated sitting services were either block contracted or on the non-regulated list. So this has given us the opportunity to amalgamate that and place it in here. So the sitting service may include some of that personal care or practical support, but it gives us a better ability to contract for that. And then in terms of living care, We are getting a greater number of requests for living care as people wish to remain within their own home, and it gives people the opportunity to receive that through this service. So it is for personal and practical support again, but over that 24-hour period. One of the things that we want to ensure that we get through each of the services that are on offer here is that each of them is seeking to work in a re-ablement or an enablement focused way, and that we want to see that people are able to increase or maintain their level of independence through the support that they receive. Thank you.
We have actually, before we move on, if that's okay, Helen, we've got a couple of questions that it might be good to take, if that's all right. So
okay.
There is something in the Q&A, and it says the medication checks are in the practical list rather than the regulated list with a question mark. So
I think that the way that the list has been pulled together, medication administration and supervision should be within that first personal care, but we are aware that some organisations are doing some practical support for people around medication checks and linking in with pharmacies over picking up prescriptions, etc. So we'll go back and double check. It might just be the way that it's copied across onto this slide.
Okay, thank you. And there is also a couple of questions in the chat around key differences between home-based support and supported living. So you mentioned that home-based support is in a person's home. Do you consider that supported living is a model where the accommodation is not therefore in the person's own home?
My understanding, and Hannah, you might want to jump in at this point with the knowledge that you've got, is that the supported living is looking where we have either multiple units or houses of multiple occupancy, and where there is some shared element of support. So that is what we're defining as supported living. I know there are a number of definitions around supported living, and some supported living definitions refer to any support that somebody would need to be able to maintain a tenancy or live independently within their own home. For that purpose, for somebody in an individual tenancy or managing their own home, we would anticipate that would come under this list. But again, as we've said, under supported living, that would be where there would be multiple units or houses of multiple occupation, where there is some shared aspect or background hours of support being offered. That's how you understand it, isn't it, Hannah?
It is, yeah, and I think what we just recognised that we currently commissioned supported living through the domiciliary care list, and what has become apparent, I think, over the years is that there are some quite key differences in the nature of the support that we deliver, some nuances around housing related support and supporting people to be as independent as possible, learn independent living skills, and for some people that supported living is part of almost a housing journey to independence. There are also some specific asks of supported living providers around relationships with the housing provider in those houses of multiple occupancy, etc., that we wouldn't normally expect traditional home-based support services to need to engage in. So there is some rationale behind splitting it out, and would encourage people that deliver across both of those to also attend or listen back to the supported living webinar that will go into more detail about why we've split them out and kind of what the key definitions and requirements are.
Thank you, Hannah and Helen. There is a question about will providers be able to apply to lists later in the year, and will they need to do a whole new submission at that point if that's the case? So they're currently working across two areas, residential care and community-based support, but will be changing from residential care to home-based support and supported housing early in 2023. So that's why they're asking.
So in terms of, what we, and again, this will be on the FAQs, but there will be an initial application period. We're looking to launch at the beginning of June. There will be an initial period where the application window is open, so to speak. The list will remain open, but after that initial period, we will seek to review applications on a periodic basis. Initially, we're looking at that being every 6 months, but we can review that if there is need within the market, or if there is an urgent need to onboard a provider sooner than that. There are sets of circumstances whereby we can take applications and review them earlier, but the list will remain open for providers to apply at any point from the 1st of June. It will just be the frequency at which we review applications that might vary according to market need. If a provider can apply to join more than one list at the same time, so we've streamlined the application process, so all of that kind of high level organisational information will be submitted only once, and then we'll obviously need to ask you some service specific questions around price and particular abilities to meet the standards in the service specifications. We'll have to do that for each list. I would envisage that if you have already joined the list at an organisational level and you are just applying to join a new list, you would only need to complete the service specific information at the point of joining that new list. But we'll clarify that through the FAQs, but that would be how I envisage that happening.
Thank you, Hannah. And just one really quick question, I think then we can move on to the next slide. Would the non-shared elements of supported living packages be under the home-based support list then?
My understanding is that actually what will happen is if it's identified as a supported living service, everything related to that service will go through onto the individual service contracts that we have. So all aspects of that. I suppose if you are a supported living provider, but you do deliver some community support, it may be that you want to join this list so that you can take on new packages as well. So I think, as Hannah said before, it would be really useful for you to join that supported living one so that you can see the differences and the nuances. Yes, if it's a supported living service, it will all go through that list. If it is home-based service, then it will come through this list and it will be on those respective contracts for that.
Brilliant, thanks Helen. And just for everybody, it does come up on a later slide, but the supported living service specific webinar is on the 24th of May at 2:30 for if people want to put a hold in their calendar. I'll click on a slide.
Thank you. So I just wanted to talk here about sort of some of the main changes to the home-based services approved provider list. So in terms of the costing model and the payment terms, we have looked at what we have as our locality averages in terms of rates, and at the outset of the list, we are asking that rates that come in are within 10% of that locality average. We may allow additional rates or higher or lower rates dependent on that, but what we would be doing is a piece of work with each of those providers that submit those different rates to be really clear on the rationale and to understand the background to it before that can be approved. We are covering complex and non-complex rates within this list, and we will be that will be represented within the pricing schedules that come out as appropriate, which is not dissimilar to how you currently work on there. We work in an urban, rural and super rural areas and localities, and we will be asking for you to provide your rates in line with urban, rural and super rural under each of the service definitions we've just discussed on the previous page. Again, we've previously worked under urban, rural and super rural, and if you remember, we have some maps that are available that almost have sort of the urban areas, the wider rural areas, and then everything else that falls outside of those eggs, I suppose, for want of a better word, that all comes under the super rural. One of the big changes that we have in here is we will be looking at an hours per week contract, which will be more akin to the individual service contracts you would previously have received for supported living. The reason that we want to do that is we want to promote the ability for care and support providers to actively work with individuals to determine how they want that care to be delivered. You will still be in receipt of a support plan from North Yorkshire County Council that will define specific elements of service where that has to be required, but we would want that narrative and that discussion to be led with providers, between providers and the person. So we're hoping that that's actually going to work in your benefit. There is some background work for us to do with care and support colleagues and across our whole systems to make sure that you get out the support plans in the best possible way, and that those contracts come out to you in that way as well. But we are beavering away in the background to make sure that our systems and processes reflect what we've put into the new approved provider list. We are looking at the removal of 15-minute calls. It's been an aspirational wish of most local authorities to do that for many years. It is anticipated that from the start of this service, any new individual service contracts will not include 15-minute calls. And as reassessments of pre-existing packages take place, where there are 15-minute calls, that is considered and they will be removed from that service so that we are meeting that requirement. That's something that's all of our leadership team agree on, that we absolutely want to remove that. Where they continue for what I'm going to term for today's purpose a legacy package, so where you're already delivering support, what will happen is that that will be covered by the guidance you're already working to. And then missed and late visits. We have made sure through the standards and outcomes framework, we standardised the approach to recording and reporting missed and late visits. We know that you already have a process in which you identify or let us know if you have emergency services going in, or you've increased or decreased packages. So we view this would go along in a similar way to that. So in terms of absences and notice periods, at the moment within the current list, you get paid for, or there is a 3 days notice on each individual service contract. What we have here is we are looking at absences as 5 days, I think is the notice period, we've agreed on that. But for hospitalisation, we're seeking to pay 50% payment for up to 7 days. We know that you've been working with us on resets in the current processes that you've got, and we're hoping that this will allow that reset process to work better, to enable you to manage your rotas better, and to make sure you've got those staff available where you need to. Other absences, I've just discussed and mentioned this, a 5 day notice period for people to inform you of planned absences. But what we would do is we would pay for up to a maximum of 14 days per year at your hourly rate that's been determined, so that you are getting some recognition for that. I think at the moment you're currently only paid on actuals completely, so you're not always getting that. And then notice to end packages, we've got 28 days notice for up to 10 packages, and for 10 individual service contracts we'd be looking, we've got 28 days notice for 10 individual service contracts, or up to 100 hours of care. I can't see the rest of the slide, it's just jumped off my screen because of our pictures on the side.
So we're looking at 20, so we're just looking to standardise the notice periods. It's fine, Helen, mine keeps flickering as well. So 28 days notice if you are handing back to us 10 packages of care, so 10 individual service contracts, or up to 100 hours of care. So 28 days notice for those. And then for anything over that, so if you've got 11 or more packages of care or individual service contracts, however we want to term them, or if you're looking to hand back over 100 hours of care, then ideally we would like to take 3 months notice from you, just to ensure that transition. Really, we accept, I think, that there will be scenarios out with that where we might come to an alternative mutual agreement, but these are the standard standardized notice periods that will be included in the new contract.
Thank you, Hannah. Apologies, I couldn't see there. And then there's 2 final points I just wanted to make. You will all be aware that at the moment we are working towards a fair cost of care exercise. For anyone, just as a bit of a shout out, who hasn't engaged with that process at the moment or registered to complete their returns, I absolutely would urge you to do so. It is being led on by the Independent Care Group. And so please get in touch with either Nick or John there, and they can help you through that process. what we need to determine moving forwards is whether the outcomes of that fair cost of care will then have an impact to the hourly rates and the locality averages that we've got within the list. But we will keep you up to date on anything that changes as a result of that fair cost of care and the levelling up exercise which is happening on behalf of governments. So we'll keep you posted on that one. And another note that I just wanted to make, which for me is a really important one, I know that some of the systems and processes of the council have historically been fairly prohibitive in your ability to do things in a really easy and flowed way. We are wanting to take this opportunity around the approved provider list to look at some of those systems and processes. It's been welcomed by a whole host of our colleagues and other teams as well. So things like inflation awards, increases and decreases to covered contracts, issuing of contracts for you. There's a whole host of things that you've told us and that internally we've identified that there is it's not easy to provide. So we just wanted to make sure that we're using this as an opportunity to review that as well.
Perfect, thank you. I mean, we have got lots of questions. So what I'm going to suggest is that we hold the questions back to the end. There is just one that's come up 3 or 4 times though, which I think might be good to take now. And that's about locality average rates, and will you be publishing them?
Yes, we will be publishing them. They will be available on the pricing submission that people can allocate their prices to, so they can see what they're working out their within what works out within 10% of that locality average.
All right, that's brilliant. Thank you. I think it's over to you, Julie.
Thanks, Gillian. This is going to be a very quick whistle-stop tour of the quality pathway. I will be doing at later dates after you've went through all the APL processes. I will be doing some sessions on Care Connected and some group sessions just to talk through some of the areas. Can I have the next slide, please, Gillian? So I'm not going to cover everything because you can see the slides for yourself, but the quality pathway vision ultimately is to have a clear end-to-end process that drives quality in our market, enabling early intervention, providing support at the right time, and have a consistent approach that enables good quality care across our market. It's about identifying risk and rating our providers as well, again, to identify that early intervention and the right support. A flexible dynamic approach to our quality assurance as well. Obviously previously you're used to this continuation of visits, obviously taking some learning from COVID, what can we do virtually, and also what can you do as trusted assessors to self-assess yourself as well. And we want to align our standards to support CQC inspections, drive quality, and make sure that best practice is included, very much what Hannah and Helen touched on with TLAP and the outcomes framework as well. Can I have the next slide, please, Gillian? And as I mentioned, the trusted assessments, I thought this was really important to include, and as I say, we'll see the approach a little bit later, but those self-assessments for yourself, so you can see the questions that we're going to ask and you can assess yourself. And again, it's just, it gives you the ability to drive quality first before you have those visits as well. And it is about us preparing as a local authority for our CQC assurance framework and the ICSs that are going to be coming in. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, as I say, our driver is about market sustainability and reducing provider failure and to work better together. So we've created the quality pathway provider journey. So you'll see this, I know it's probably really difficult for you to read on the screen, but the blue route is basically your first year on the APL and all the different interventions that will happen on that first year. And the green route is that continuation of the years moving forward as well. And you'll see on there about the self-assessments. Our purple route at the bottom is something that we're working on, and it's going to be our pathway to outstanding. So where we can support those green rated providers from getting from good to outstanding. And on the left here is our intervention. So we have 4 levels of intervention, which I'll talk about on the next slide, please. Oh, actually, I don't. I have the Data Intelligence Hub first. So our Data Intelligence Hub, our ambition is to have a central system for gathering intelligence. For example, some of the things that you do currently, the R&R processes, the outcomes of our quality visits, safeguarding information and other soft intelligence that we get in from families, from people that use your service, and from you, gathering it all into one place and making sure we can get that information back out. And again, that supports that early intervention as well, and that link into the appropriate support at the right time that helps you ultimately. Can I have the next slide, please? And this is the visual diagram, which is went a wee bit funny, but just as an example, if you're a green rated provider, it will be about where we can use those self-assessments for you to assure yourself, looking at our approach to visits. Can they be done? Is it a validation visit needs to be done, or can we do that virtually, or does it need to be face-to-face? And that level 1 support that will be given is that advice and guidance. And on the flip side, down at level 3, this is about, again, this would be a high risk provider, red rated, and the support that we'll be able to offer there is some practical supports that could be within your service, as well as some offers of training. So very much, if anyone has had support from our quality improvement officers, this is pieces of work that they'll be doing as well. Can I have the next slide, please? And just to introduce PAMS, which I've heard mentioned quite a few times. So it stands for Provider Assessment Market Management Solution. So even though North Yorkshire have signed up to this is a regional procurement. So it's a regional agreement that we use this system. And for people who have got services across England, they may already be using this PAM system. So again, this links very much back to what Helen was talking about those 5 domains in the 16 outcome standard. This will support you making sure that you meet those contractual expectations. This is where we'll be able to RAG rate and risk rate our providers, because it does have a risk profiler in there which gathers intelligence from the CQC website. We'll be able to feed into that from our quality assessment visits as the hygiene. So it pulls lots of information through onto the system. So you'll see a little bit more about this. And as I say, I will have focus sessions around the quality pathway and the PAM system as we move forward. But I think that might be it from me, Gillian.
Thank you, Julie. There is, I mean, there are a couple of questions in there, but there's one that is associated to the risk level. If I could highlight that now. So the question is, how will the risk level and evidence of this be shared with providers?
So it will be through the quality officers that you work with. It will be intelligence that we currently gather just now. For example, if you've got a provider that's in organisational safeguarding and they're receiving that level 3 support currently. So for us, that's deemed as a high risk provider, because what we're trying to do is prevent further breaches of the contract, to make sure people are receiving appropriate care. So that's something we could discuss as when we have those meetings going forward, if people would want to see those risk ratings for themselves. But for a quality assessment, they will get that rating. So if we conduct a quality assessment, you will receive that rating for PAMS, but wholly as a local authority, we always gather soft intelligence and other raw data to inform how we approach quality visits, for example. So if you're a good rated provider, recent CQC, low safeguardings, as I say, there'll be that self-assessment approach to visits potentially. If there's lots going on, again, it's about supporting you as providers. It isn't about, who's our good and poor providers. It's about actually, where do we need to intervene? Where do you need support, and what support can we give you? So that's what it's about with the ratings. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Julie. That's great. So I think it's over to me actually now, isn't it? So I want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about the support that North Yorkshire County Council have put in place through Go for Growth. So we have had 3 sessions in addition to this one already. So we ran a webinar that was dedicated to the voluntary sector, which the recording of that and the slide deck are available on the Go for Growth LinkedIn page. Or if you want to email us in Go for Growth, if you didn't register for that event, we can always email the slide deck and the copy of the video out to you. We also had a process-related webinar, which the recording link is in the slide here, which talked through, if you haven't registered to the EU Supply Your Tender portal, how to register and how to express interest. And that might be quite relevant actually. The last time you might have gone through the approved provider list procurement or any procurement with North Yorkshire County Council, it may Your Tender site, which was hosted by Proactis, and it's now hosted by Marcel. The system actually is a lot more intuitive than it used to be, so you may have no trouble at all. But if you do need any support or help with registration or finding the opportunity and then getting your interest expressed, getting the documents, understanding the application itself, and anything to do with the process of taking part, then Go for Growth is there to help. For any service specific questions, pricing, delivery, that would remain with North Yorkshire County Council, but we will pick anything up to do with process. We've put together some support already, so you can see on screen that there are tutorial videos that are 4 or 5 minutes in length maximum that show you in slower time how to register to Your Tender, how to set up alerts so that when the opportunity goes live on or around the 1st of June, you'll get a notification, or how to go into the system and find the opportunity proactively, and then how to express interest. There's lots more videos besides in terms of setting up policies and other handy hints in how to prepare for a procurement, and our YouTube channel for Go for Growth is on the screen as well. And just in addition, we've got, and I'm going to go to the third point. We had the first one yesterday. The drop-in sessions don't require a pre-registration. You can literally do what it says on the tin and just drop in. And this again is for process-related questions, but it's to give providers opportunities both prior to the procurement going live and whilst the procurement itself is live, to come and ask any questions around actually how to navigate the application form, how to fill bits and pieces in, how to find the documents, how to understand what's being asked for from a non-technical perspective. And that's really to free up North Yorkshire so that they can deal with the technical stuff and give providers a place to go throughout the whole process to go and ask those questions. We went through on yesterday's session with the providers that came how to register to EU Supply, and we went through the frequently asked questions document that we're compiling. That document is fluid, so we'll update it weekly, and that will be published both through Go for Growth and also on the, is it the partnerships page on the website, Hannah? Have I got the name right?
Yeah. We'll make that available, hopefully for those providers that are current providers. That's now coming out in a weekly special APL provider bulletin that we've got that has the direct link to that North Yorkshire Partnerships webpage, but we can make that readily available as well.
Perfect. And if you're not a current provider, that will be available through Go for Growth as well. So there's lots of routes to getting answers to frequently asked questions. But also, if you've got any questions, you can come to a drop-in session, or if you prefer, you can book a one-to-one session with either myself or my colleague Lauren in Go for Growth. And again, that's all to do with process. Rather than the technical questions, but you can come along and they're in confidence chats, so we don't feed that back to North Yorkshire, but you can come along and have a chat with us. The drop-in sessions that we've got next Friday the 27th, and then we've got the 1st of June, 9th, 16th, 23rd and 30th of June. What we are thinking is, if the procurement goes live on the 1st of June as planned, on the 9th of June, we'll dedicate that drop-in session to having a step-by-step walkthrough of the application form itself, which should be super helpful for providers, especially if it's been a while since you last actually got involved in a procurement process. So we'll spend 45 minutes dedicated just to going through the application form. And again, we'll be open to questions, which can always be anonymised if you want them to be, to hopefully help get through that process. And then, of course, today we're looking at home-based support, but we do have 3 other service-specific webinars that are going on. They're all on the Go for Growth Eventbrite page for you to register for, but we have tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. looking at residential and nursing. We have the supported living that we've talked about, which is coming up on the 24th at 2:30 p.m. and then community-based support on the 26th of May at 10. Terms of what's coming in those.
Gillian, I think we're losing you a little bit. Is everyone else getting that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was just messaging. Yeah. Do you want me to pick up the FAQs?
And I think from a slide deck perspective, that's if everyone's happy to take some questions, is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, Gillian, can you hear us? We just lost you. Yeah, you're back now. We've lost the slide.
I can hear you.
You were just
Yeah, our signal's a little unstable at this end. So if you want to take the Q&A, Hannah, you go right ahead.
Okay, no problem. I think you were just finishing up with the dates of the service-specific webinars, so we'll make sure they're circulated to everybody as well, just in case you missed that. But the next one is tomorrow, and that's for residential and nursing. So if you're interested in that, make sure you join the residential and nursing one. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up. I'm going to start with the chat because there's a few questions in here, I think, and then I'll move over to the Q&A. So we picked up about the locality average rates, and they will be published as part of the tender, so they'll be within the pricing schedule document, as Helen referred to. We've got a question from Neil about legacy packages, and I think probably it's just to acknowledge your point there, Neil, that we recognise that there is a challenge around historical and current contractual rates that will continue to apply, because these new contracts and your new rates will be for new business. I think we absolutely hear you about the challenge with those packages. I think it's an issue of resource and considering the best and pragmatic solution to addressing that. And I think all I can do at the moment is assure you that we know that's an issue, and the council is exploring solutions about how we address historical and legacy packages going forward. I don't know if Helen, you want to add anything to that?
I think you've kind of covered it really. I think it's as for you guys as providers, it's created lots and lots of discussion for us internally. We've had the discussion over it would be nice to have everything at the same, but then how we manage that within the systems and processes we have. So I suppose just to support what Hannah said, we are looking at it as a specific piece of work. So we will feed back anything that comes through in relation to how we will manage legacy packages. But at the moment, the new list will be for new services, and as people are reassessed or any changes in need occur, they will then move on to that new list as a new contract is issued.
Great. Thank you. I think the next one might be for you, Helen, and I think you've probably already touched on it, but it's whether you've got anything to add. It's about once the completion of the fair cost of care exercises is completed, do we know yet how we might level up the rates if that's deemed to be necessary? And I think probably we don't know exactly how we'll do that yet, but
I think the feedback is we're currently in the throes of undertaking the fair cost of care exercise. That is one of a number of things we have to do as part of the levelling up process. So at the moment, we don't know what's going to come out of that versus where we currently are. There is a requirement for us to make sure that we do have a sustainable market, and that isn't just at the point at which we've done the fair cost of care exercise and created that report. It's an ongoing sustainable market that is required, and we've got a period of time in which to actually complete that. I don't think we know quite how it will be applied to the new list, because it's just conflicting in terms of dates. The new approved provider list, we've developed it that it will be with a start date in October. However, we know that this is an overlaid national piece of requirement that we've got to do as a local authority. So the two things will fit hand in glove. We just need to work out exactly how that happens. We will keep you informed, but where there are changes to costs as a result of that, I would anticipate at this point that will be reflected, but we will keep you posted on where we get to with that.
Thanks, Helen. Okay, so I'll just work through the Q&A now. So we've got a question around whether providers can apply to just two sections of the home-based support list. So for example, if they only deliver non-regulated support, can they apply to just the relevant sections?
Absolutely. You can deliver for whatever services you provide across all four lists, or parts of individual lists. And if your service modelling changes throughout the period of the approved provider list, as Hannah's referred to before, if you need to apply to another list, we would take the organisational information into account that you've already supplied, and it would be around the service specific stuff. And if it's an extension on the current list, it would probably be around that pricing submission where there's any changes, and if there's anything else that we need to know around that specific service area. So absolutely apply for what you're doing, but absolutely we acknowledge that things change for providers, the way in which your delivery models work change. So we'll be open to allow those changes to happen throughout the term.
That's great. And linked to that question, there's a question, well, there's a statement, I guess, recognising that the cost of delivering regulated services can often be more expensive than delivering non-regulated services. Will these differences be taken into account?
Yes, we have done locality averages, which will be shared with you, and you'll be able to make a judgment around that 10% based on the different service types. And I think indeed for some of the service areas, the sitting service and the living care, I don't actually think we've given a locality average, because they're things that haven't always been purchased through the list at this point. But the pricing schedule will be really clear, so you know exactly what you're working within, and we'll make sure that it's sectioned out so it's easy to complete.
Helen, there's a couple of questions around whether complex care will have a definition attached to it, and request for explanations of that. And I think where we've got to with that is that there will, we will look to include a definition within the service specification. However, we're just finalising some of that work at the moment, so we'll probably defer that question to the FAQs if that's okay. I'm just working my way through these now. I'm probably not as good at doing this as you, Jill. We've got a question around whether, so a few questions actually related to supported living, but I'll just pick up the one of them, which is the application to supported living, whether it's dependent on CQC registration or whether they can apply if registered under home care. And I think the detail of this will be covered in the supported living webinar, but what I think we do acknowledge is that registration might be under home care or personal care, and we accept that. It will be the property and or the scheme that defines that service as supported living according to the North Yorkshire County Council definition.
I think just to add to that, Hannah, I hope you don't mind me jumping in, is that we also acknowledge that we have got some services that provide supported living that are non-regulated. They're not providing that personal care, depending on the client group or the needs of those individuals that they've got. So it would, in the same way as the home-based support, allow regulated and non-regulated. It will in that regard as well.
Great. And then we've got a question, will existing services be affected if a provider is unsuccessful in the re-tender? So existing packages of care and individual service contracts will continue, as we've said, as legacy packages, and they'll be bound by the terms and conditions of the current PPA. And that's kind of laid out in the current PPA, is that the ISCs might exceed the term of the pre-purchasing agreement. The chances of not being approved onto the list, I guess there's the pricing and the quality assessment that will take place as part of the application. If it's deemed that the quality threshold isn't met, then the usual processes would apply, in line with what Julie said around receiving that quality improvement support from our internal teams via the new quality pathway. And we will be looking to work with you to get you to a position where we can work together under the terms of the new list. But your existing packages, if you are not approved or you opt not to join the new approved provider list, your legacy packages and current packages of care would remain in place under the terms and conditions of the current PPA.
I'll just jump in there whilst you look at the next question. Yeah, just to add to what Hannah said, as I said, the quality pathway is completely about delivering support and those interventions where they're needed. So we would ensure that we would get someone up to the appropriate standard if it was quality related to make sure that you can apply to that list and that not be a deterrent. So that support will absolutely be there for you.
Thank you. And then there's just a question about whether notice periods are both ways. I'm probably going to defer part of that question, but what I'm taking from that question is that if we give notice to the provider that we wish to end a package of care, and I think where we've got to with the discussions around that is that the most likely reason that the council would end a package of care for a person is if the person's needs had changed. And we envisage that the provider would be part of that discussion, would be part of that reassessment process, and therefore would almost be sort of in agreement and party to that decision around the change in need and the change in package of care. I'm going to defer the specifics to the FAQs, but that's kind of where we're at with that would be the most likely scenario, that we were looking to terminate a package of care with you as a provider, and we would hope that you would kind of be synonymous with the decision making around that, in line with the person's needs. I think I've picked most of those up, Jill. If there isn't any we've missed, I'm happy to look at them as part of the FAQs.
No, I think we've covered all of the questions and all of the chats. So, and I think that's been done really comprehensively. If there are any further questions, if the minute we finish you think, oh, I wanted to ask that, please get in touch either through Go for Growth or through the contact details that were on the slides. I'm sure everyone's happy to take questions in slower time if we need to. But I think that's it from us. So if you've registered for today, you will automatically get a copy of the slides and the video recording. So that will be out with you in the next 24 hours or so. It'll also be on our LinkedIn page. If you do need anything from Go for Growth, give us a shout. But thank you, Julie. Thank you, Hannah and Helen, for taking the time out today. And hopefully we'll see more of you on the future service-specific webinars going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.